Praise the Lord. Hello, hello. Welcome to What's Your Testimony? We're broadcasting this Sunday afternoon in Charlotte, North Carolina from WYTV7 Christian Broadcasting, and I'm your host, Angie Hodges. And today, my guest, oh, she's amazing. My guest is Theresa Mason Browning. She's a woman of true insight and a lively spirit. She's an author and a motivational speaker that motivates others to rise above their circumstance and become the kings and queens that God would be proud of. She was born in Oklahoma, but raised in Washington, D.C., and now resides in South Carolina. Welcome, 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 Theresa. So happy to have you here.
Thank you. Good evening, Angela. Thank you for having me. I do appreciate it.
Yes, it's so wonderful just to meet you. And you have an amazing, amazing testimony that I know our listeners will be blessed by. So let's just go ahead and get right to it.
I'm ready when you are.
Go right ahead.
My testimony is that we all have to rise above adversity, and we can all say that we've been through something. And to sit here and say that I am a saint would be totally wrong. I've been through a lot in my life. However, I chose not to allow what I went through to define who I am today in this life.
And that's true. You know what? We all, none of us, we all fall short if we want to stand on a hill and say we haven't been through anything. But basically, your story that captured me when I first heard you speak was your inmate number. Can you tell us about your inmate number and how that came about?
You know, we all have a number. It's whether we choose to look at the number. My number just happened to be 1745058. And however I had that number, it still does not define who I am today and the process in which I got that number. 10 years ago, I found myself participating in what I thought was a legal transaction. And I ended up having to do 2.5 years. 2.5 years might not seem like much to one person. It may be a lot to another person, but it was everything to me. And it caused a lot of discomfort, dysfunction. It was a lot. It was a lot for me to entail at that time.
And so did you have a family did you have a family or children at that time when you ended up going to, was it prison that you went to or to jail?
I actually went to prison. I was in West Virginia, and I was in West Virginia for 2.5 years. And yes, I did. I had to leave 2 minor children in the home. And that was a big pill for me, because you're scared about, you're going to go to prison. You still have 2 children that you have to try to get through school. And you're like at a loss because you're already from a dysfunctional family. So you already have that against you. And then you're now creating a little bit more of a havoc for them. So it makes it difficult.
Wow. And there might be some listeners, some viewers today that have had to go through this experience, that might have had to go to jail or had to go to prison and leave behind a family. And so many people are walking around in shame as if there's no hope for them. But looking at you right there with that smile on your face today, if anyone doubts, there is hope.
Not only is it hope, there is a rainbow at the end of your journey. And you just have to stay rooted and grounded. And if you learn about God before you go, you take God with you, because God is forever present. or you find God while you're there and you learn to lean on God and not into your own understanding, and he will direct your path and he will guide you through the process. And I know being in prison, people called me the holy lady, and I'm trying to figure out why. But God has a way of showing up, and your light will shine and you don't have to say anything.
Was there something, what was your life growing up like? Because you said that you hinted to the fact that there was some type of dysfunction. What was your life growing up like a child?
I don't think I have enough time to tell you what it was, but I'll say that it was very, very dysfunctional. I mean, I grew up not knowing what love was. I grew up thinking that to be beat was normal. I grew up thinking that this was the way of life. I was thinking that, well, maybe other children are going through the same thing that I'm going through, so you can't say anything. You have to keep it to yourself. And then you have a parent who threatens you and says to you, if you tell anybody what I did to you, I'm going to kill you. And as a child, when you're scarred like that, what do? You do just what she says do. Keep it a secret.
So you walked around and you kept this a secret. Was there a boiling point where you just decided to spew and let this go and stop holding the secret? Or did you just continue on with the way you have been told?
I went to the doctors, and I think the last time I went to the doctors, and I was a young girl, and he explained to me, he said, I can't help you if you don't tell me what's going on in your family. But I also had what my mother said in my ear, if I told the story, that she would kill me. So I decided that the best thing to do was just to keep the secret. But each time I kept the secret, the whippings became more. It became more violent. It became more dysfunction. And it was like, at one point, I had reached the boiling point, and I just said, well, I think it's just better for me to run away. I don't know what I was going to run to or what I was going to run in, or I just knew I wanted to run away from my family. I didn't want to be there anymore.
So you had a doctor. Was this your medical doctor?
Yes, it was a medical doctor. Every time my mom had the force, her hands, every time she would hit me, she would break my nose. And it would bleed for hours and hours and hours on the end. And what they had to do was, she eventually took me to the doctor. And the first couple times they said, okay, we understand you fell down the steps. Okay, we understand you ran into the door. Okay, but by the third time, they were like, they had to put tubes in my nose. They was like, there's something else going on here. You're just not willing to say anything about it.
Wow, I prayed for the little girl in you, just to, as I'm sitting here, just imagining the pain, the hurt, the confusion inside of your spirit, to have your mother doing this and wanting help, wanting somebody to help you, but not being able to speak out and let that be known.
And I think that was the most difficult part, walking around day to day with these scars, but I couldn't say anything.
And I know that there's probably some listeners, somebody that's listening to this right now that can identify with this story, that unfortunately they might have been abused, hit, and mistreated by someone that they love. And I just want them to know that there's hope and that there's salvation, and that God can help us to deal with and help to comfort us from all types of pain. And each one of us, unfortunately, there is some type of, there's some cross that each of us has to bear, and no bearing on the person, but that he offers salvation. And, you know, just from dealing with people that have dealt with this type of trauma many times in childhood, I know that it usually transfers to adulthood. So how did this follow you into your adulthood?
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked it. It affected my adulthood to the point where I became dysfunctional with my own children, but not in the manner of beating them, but Angela, not in the manner of loving them, because I knew nothing about loving a child. I thought loving my children was to go to work, to put food on the table, to provide a roof over their head. But it was more than that. They needed me. They needed me to love them. They needed me to love them unconditionally. I knew nothing about it. And it came to a point where I was loving, or should I say, loving one child more than the others. And it became a private feud that one child was receiving more than the other children. And I didn't see it until it was far too late.
Oh, wow. Now, you know, you done open up a big old can of worms right there. There are so many families where children perceive, and sometimes whether right or wrong, in your case, you're being honest. You're saying that that was the case, where there is some type of, favoritism. Now, sometimes it could be, well, Johnny got 2 pieces of candy and I got 3. But in your case, this was beyond that, because having multiple children, I know you can't make everything always equal, but apparently you're saying there was a little bit something else going on there.
I had a 10-year gap in between the 2 sets of children that I had. I had a 9-year-old, a 10-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And then I decided I would become a mom again. And after not having any kids for 10 years and have this little girl, and the man wasn't perfect. He was an abuser. So I tried to do everything that I could to look good in his eyes, because I didn't want him to beat me, to mentally abuse me. So I made the child stand out because I didn't know another way to do it. And I didn't realize that I was going down a dark road, meaning I'm being abused by her father, but yet I'm putting her on a pedestal. And I have 3 other children that are looking at this and they're saying, like, what is she doing? But I didn't realize any of this until far, far, far down the road.
Wow. And you hinted there also about domestic violence. And they say nearly 20 people every minute becomes a victim of domestic violence. And unfortunately, there's probably a listener right now that has been abused, or unfortunately might be abused. There's a number. It's a confidential number, open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 1-800-799-SAFE, or 1-800-799-7233. Your conversations are confidential. And if you need a resource, somebody to talk to, someone to help give you a plan, someone just to be a listening ear, someone to help you with resources. Maybe you don't know where to go or where you can go or what to do, and they can refer you to resources in your community. Because it's a bad situation for any woman. And unfortunately, there are men that are in that situation as well, but for any woman to be a part of. And Theresa, I know that you've written some books. Now, are all of your books about your story and the things that you've been through, or are they stories on just fictional stories that you've made up?
The first 3 books are actually detailed towards my life, but of course we have to change the names and the places and put it in a fictional form. But I wrote this book, or these 3 books, as a healer and a guide. I wanted it to be not something that I was just airing my dirty laundry about. No, I wanted it to be about healing, restoration, releasing, revealing, and revitalizing, because we can do all things through Christ that strengthen us. We're all gonna, some of us may go through domestic violence, some of us may not. Some of us may have a dysfunctional family, some of us may not. But for those that do, we have to write about it. I remember my first book signing. I went to New York and I did Harlem in the Streets. And I met a young lady, 72 years old, and she walked up to me, and I had never been to New York for anything outside of church. And she came up to me and she said, "Is your name Theresa Browning?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I'd like to talk to you." And I was like scared to death because no one knew me there. And she said, "I want to tell you a story." She said, "I read your first book in one night." She said, "I told my husband to shut up. I wasn't going to cook, nothing. But," she said, "you allowed me to release a secret that I had held for 25 years. And I looked towards heaven and I said, thank you, Lord. If I don't do nothing but help one person, I'm grateful for the job that I've done, because it's not about me. It's about helping others and to get them to do that same thing and release what they.
Yes, that is so true. And listening to you makes me think of the scripture actually that I had in mind for this show. And with everything that you said, it would almost make someone say, but how? But God. Romans 8:28. And we know that in all things, God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. And somebody might look at this story or listen to this story and think, but she said that she's experienced all these different things from her family of origin, from the relationships that she's had, from even with her own children. How could there be any good? But there is good, because you see what she said? She's wrote these books and said if she could just help just one person. So that right there, for listeners, viewers, whoever that is listening to this story, I don't know what you've experienced. You could have experienced some of these things or something else. But even in your pain, even in your deepest hurt, there is some good that can come up out of it. And Theresa, do you have anything that you'd like to share if there's any listeners or viewers that might be going through some of these same experiences? And just think about, right now there's female prison inmates have increased in 36 states. That's more than half of the US. And some of these women get out and probably feel like there's no hope for them. But look at you. How many books have you written?
I've written 4 books and I have 2 books. Do not let your circumstance define who you are. Because as I stated, I have a number. It was 1745058, but my number is 1 now, because I'm number 1 in God's eyes. Because you know what? I had to go through something to see God never left me. I just had to rebuild my relationship with him. And then I would say to the women, don't give up. Don't give in. You can rise above adversity. You can rise above your storm. It's not going to be a pretty day every day, but if you lean on God and not into your own understanding and let God direct your path, you can make it, because I did. And there were times when I wanted to commit suicide. There were times when I just said, okay, I'm ready. But you know what? That wasn't God's plan for me. God has something greater for me, and I understand that. So I just say to them, hold on to God's unchanging hand.
Yes, praise the Lord. Thank you. Thank you so much for that amazing testimony. Thank you for just being a blessing. And you said it was just that one lady. Oh, you done got a whole lot more, because I mean that was just amazing. I don't know who's listening and who needed to be blessed by that word. And if you have a testimony that you would like to share with the listeners, please give us a call. The number is 980-290-2915. You can also reach out on the Facebook page to the WYTV7 Christian Broadcasting. Please reach out if you have a testimony that you would like to share, because there's something that you've been through, just like Theresa said, even if it can just touch that one, where you can show someone the love of Christ in what you've experienced. And so I'd like to thank you again, Theresa, so much. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. I'd like to thank our listeners, our viewers, and I'd like to thank WYTV7 Christian Broadcasting for doing this show. And of course, we'd like to thank God for making it all possible for all of us. And until we meet again next time on What's Your Testimony, please have a fabulous day and glorify God in all that you do. Thank you. And praise His name. I get the run.